I was thinking earlier today about the astonishing amount of information about human physiology and neurobiology that has become available to us in the last 50 years since I started studying yoga and meditation. It's really amazing and kind of overwhelming in a way, I am constantly buying books that I will never read. And I'm buying books that I will never read because, we all do, I suppose, but because I want to know all of these amazing details, even though I am cognizant that the information that I will derive from this book may turn out to be incomplete or wrong, and might, in fact, add to my confusion, not diminish it in the slightest. For me, there's always this impulse to want to expand my knowledge base and create, and my motivation is I'm attempting to create more of an opportunity to help the people that I love and to help the people that I come in contact with who turn up in my life and want help. And, for that, knowledge is really a good thing. But then there is the other impulse, and what keeps me from going crazy, buried in all the books that I don't read, is the understanding that at the end of the day, our life is extremely simple, really. It's not complicated at all. And the real complication comes in. Life is work. That's what it is. And the complication, or layers of complication, come from our resistance to engaging the work that is in front of us to do. And, it's that simple in a way. So, this, on the one hand, our book, the Shivastotravali, is sort of an example of that, of this conundrum that we have, because it's a book. And it has information in it about, it's telling us about 10th century India. It's telling us about royal court politics and academia from the perspective of the highest echelons of Indian society in the 10th century. And we could sit here and tease out quite a lot of information about Indian culture and Indian politics and Indian political dynamics, if we wanted to, because it's all right here in the words. But there are people in the world whose work I come across regularly who are actually doing this online for money. And, teasing out as much information as they can, and other people who are paying them for it. And I suppose the question that I have to myself on a regular basis is, why? What possible good is it? But, history is interesting, and history is important in that it tells us the story of who won and what in their winning has endured. And perhaps it can inspire us to think about why the winners win and what it is that facilitates endurance in politics and economics and culture. But none of that, actually is going to do a whole lot for us at the end, when it comes time for us to actually get to work. Because whatever the work is, it's just digging in and doing it and doing it and doing it. For me, the one thing that our book that we're looking at now speaks to me about, that is, for me, super important and an extraordinary pathway that is available to us that most people don't notice, is this work is informing us, or maybe reminding us, how important it is in our everyday lives, doing our everyday work that we are doing to try to fabricate a life for ourselves that has some stability and endurance. How important it is to reach into ourselves and bring to our everyday, ordinary work that we have to do, to bring to that everyday work, a sense of joy and devotion. Because what really makes a difference, both in terms of how we process the details of the work that we are doing, details that we get exposed to, and the challenges that come forward, joy is the background. It's kind of the environment in which so much more information that we are exposed to on an everyday basis gets absorbed into us and processed. When we are in a state of joy, we are taking in so much more information, and that information that we're taking in is being structured in our awareness differently than in any other state. And it is this state of joy that really begins to create for us bridges to the, sort of a growing awareness and a growing understanding and a growing appreciation that facilitates our promotion. Or a different way of saying it is, it facilitates the transcendence of the lowest dimensions of the work that we're called upon to do, and really allows us to, see into what we're doing, better ways to do it, easier ways to do it, genius ways to do it. It is our ability to bring our best self to our everyday life that is what permeates our everyday life with beauty and with joy, and it is what allows us to continue to create beauty and joy, and really build a life that is completely and totally finer and more extraordinary than the life we were born into. You know, so many people are constantly paying attention to what's going on over there and what's going on over there and who's doing what to whom and why and what the politics are of this and that. So many people that I meet who come here, I mean, we're mostly beyond it, mostly, but are constantly trying to figure out what the angle is here, what's really going on here. They want the inside story. You know, all of that stuff, all of the focus outside on the dynamics of our environment, at least in my life. Now, remember that I grew up in a big family. I went to a small town high school where the community was highly structured. It was like a caste system in the community and in the high school. And I wasn't rich. So, you know, and then I went to college and became deeply involved in politics. But honest to God, I can say through the whole of my development and even up to this moment, I haven't paid that much attention to the politics of my environment. It has never dominated my awareness. What has dominated my awareness is the importance of connecting to my heart and bringing forth in my day, every day, my best self, you know, with you know, joy inside me and caring for the people around me, and you know, and a smile on my face as best as humanly possible, you know, is really what has made the difference. To get too tangled up in other people and what they're doing and what this thing and that, all the angles, is like, it's absurd because you can't do anything about it. What you can do is bring, you know, more loving awareness into yourself and your field every single day. And that's what you can do. And it's work, and you know, and it's wonderful. So, so that's my thought on the conjunction of this esoteric notion of devotion and the challenging process of navigating any environment in this world, especially when we are at the phase in our life where we feel, you know, some kind of pull or push to accomplish something. For me now, I have absolutely no agenda anymore. I have one thing I want to accomplish. That is, before I die, I want to be so disentangled in this world, so disentangled from every aspect of this world, and so deeply immersed in contact, alignment, and flow that I don't notice any separation between me and anything, and that when my mind and spirit separate from this body, it is so far beyond any kind of possibility of returning that I will not. That's all I'm doing. That's what I'm here to do from now on. I don't, sincerely, you must know this. If I never have another student as long as I live, I am happy. I am grateful for all of you in my life, grateful, really deeply grateful. And I'm grateful that we're here together and that you like me enough that you want to listen to me talk. I really appreciate that. Nityananda, Rudy's guru, and the sort of the central person in our lineage, was really an amazing person. He was an amazing person because, for so many reasons, but he had nothing. Like nothing. Nityananda would often wear nothing. If he wore something, it was a langoti, a really tiny piece of cloth to cover himself. Otherwise, he had nothing. He wore nothing. There was a whole period in his life when he didn't even eat unless somebody else put food in his mouth. He wasn't even thinking about it. He was lost. So, you look at the people down there who have nothing and, they're deranged from it. Well, Nityananda had nothing and he was way good with it, that he had nothing. And he was such a simple person. He had nothing, he wanted nothing, he wandered in this world. People approached him and things happened. And there were around him, and I did that book of stories, and there are lots of stories. There are lots of stories about the miracles that he manifested, things that happened around him that were incredible, and things that he appears to have done that were incredible. And anytime he was ever asked about any of it, he never said, "Oh yeah, I did that." He never said anything like that. He would always say, "Oh no, that, I didn't do that," or God did that, or yes, it was amazing that this happened and somehow, it was the will of God, like that. Because however powerful Nityananda was, he never identified with any expression of his creative energy at all. He never said I, mine, any such thing. Such was his devotion that he was constantly immersed in the dissolution of his boundaries. Boundaries is a big word for us in our culture and in yogic culture. He was constantly immersed in the dissolution of boundaries and his persistent identification with the bliss that is the effect of devotion. And I think his story for each of us is extremely meaningful. You know, we get into the world and we think, I'm doing this and they're doing that, and they're supposed to be helping me, but they're not, or I'm supposed to be helping them, but they're not nice to me, or on and all kinds of things. You know, we have all thoughts in our heads. And you have to understand something, and that is that everything in this world that happens to us is really it's an effect of our relationship with our own inner self. And our devotion to that, or lack of, or confusion about our own self. And, you know, it's true that some people don't have good chemistry or whatever. There are challenges every single day that we have to face. But to deal with those challenges, it is essential that we understand, first of all, nobody can limit us. Nobody. Nobody can do anything to us. It is everything that happens is us doing it to ourselves. But, we all have a story, but we do it to ourselves. And it's true that, we came in with tools, and everybody's parents gave them tools that are inappropriate to the challenge that we face in this culture. This is not the same world that we were born into, and it is vastly removed from the world that our parents were born into. And so there was no chance for any of us, really, except to the degree that we care and that we are able to access the beauty within ourselves and patiently and persistently bring forth that beauty from within ourselves in the form of careful work and constant caring for everybody, irrespective of everything. This is how we avoid being tangled up in nonsense and are constantly connecting to what is meaningful and value building and worth in expressing. So this devotional text, all of this in a way, is this devotional text is profoundly practical, but in a way that almost nobody will be able to appreciate. Because, what we are really speaking to in this text, what Utpaladeva is speaking to, is the importance of, the essentialness of having an open heart and an open mind and, participating consciously in contact, alignment, and flow. And this is the fundamental environment in which miracles happen, and the fundamental environment in which our lives can heal themselves and express themselves in this very unusual environment that has never existed before on the face of the earth. This environment that we live in now can express themselves in ways that transcend all of the power and the complexity and the challenges of this world that has never existed before. And provide us with an experience that nourishes us profoundly. This is important, practical information, not just for those of you who are young and still building your lives, but also for all of us who have made a big change in our lives in recent years and come to a place where we no longer have, certain pressures on us, and we do have the opportunity to move forward in ourselves in the work that we're doing and create something even more meaningful than ever. So the third song in the Shivastotravali is the gift of affection. The gift of affection. I like it. That's why I'm reading it to you. But I like it because it reminds us that it is important for us to have affection for our lives. Affection for our lives. And this is something we don't really think about that much. We get up in the morning and, I have my coffee, I do all the things I do, but as I am getting up in the morning, I personally am thinking about the affection that I have for my own life and the people that I share it with. That as I come forward in my day, I try to meet the people that I share my life with the affection that I feel for my life and for them in it. And this can, of course, can only happen if my heart is open and my mind is quiet. And I could tell you about the challenges that I'm faced with, but you don't want to know every day. But, and I don't care that much. But, every day I wake up and what I want to think about, and I get to choose what I want to think about. What I want to think about is the affection that I have for my life and the people that I share it with. So, the gift of affection in this work is bestowed upon us by Shiva. And it doesn't matter. It's like, it doesn't matter what you call the ultimate reality. In this context, Shiva is the ultimate reality. Some people call the ultimate reality Jesus, but the way they describe that isn't all that ultimate. And some people call it Yahweh, and some people call it Allah, and some people call it something else, Buddha, or something else. At the end of the day, when we've been through all of this kind of discussion of names and beliefs and forms and rules, there's only one ultimate reality, and that ultimate reality is beyond the name and beyond the form and beyond the rules. It is from that dimension of existence that the gift of affection comes to us. Homage to the miraculous Shambhu who, transcending the two forms, the real and the unreal, of all that exists, constitutes the third form. Utpaladeva is positing that the real and the unreal have an equivalence, and that the super real transcends both. it's kind of like light and dark have an equivalence. Light and dark. And then there is the place, the screen upon which light and dark manifest is the ultimate reality. And so constitutes the third form. We talked a little bit this morning about Donald Hoffman, who is a very interesting guy who is a scientist. He started out, I believe, as a computer gamer and learned coding and wrote games, and he got really good at it, and he got a job with the Air Force creating trainers for, computer games, computer simulations for jet fighter training. So he ended up next at the MIT Media Lab and then engaged in artificial intelligence. And now he's teaches at University of California at Irvine. And basically he is working in the field of consciousness studies and says that our brains, the picture of the world that our brains is constantly creating is not real at all. What our brain is, we are this network of sensors. Our nervous system is a network of sensors. And these sensors are constantly taking in information. Not just our eyes and our nose and our ears and our mouth, but also our skin. In fact, our entire skin is completely full of sensors. And our brain is taking in all this, we're sensing everything, and constantly our brain is structuring that information and giving us a visual image, well, giving us a set of images that we call us and our world. And Donald Hoffman argues that every bit of it is not true. That what we're seeing is not what is actually there. This is kind of an idea that was explored in The Matrix, though not as completely as Donald Hoffman is suggesting it needs to be. Movie The Matrix. Having this thought about the unrealness of the world that we live in the back of my mind constantly, reminds me ever more increasingly as I get older of the importance of devotion. Because it is, the one choice that I can make on a daily basis that I have some control over, which is the most value-building choice that is available to me. And when things are difficult, when I am feeling challenged, when there is stress in my environment, this choice is so much more important than when it's easy. in this threefold universe of bondage, and that is, body, mind, and creative energy, the only ones who are free, including the gods and sages, are those who arise from your freedom. They enjoy perfect happiness who have the unique elixir against the ills of the world. Amen. That is the remembrance of that the entire universe is inlaid with your form. Now that's kind of a fun thing, what he's saying there, and it's, it speaks to us of a little bit about Kashmir, because Kashmir is one of the places where inlaid furniture, they used to make furniture in Kashmir that was inlaid with ivory or with a shell, clam shell mostly, some oyster shell, but Kashmir was a big source of furniture making. And so he's saying here that space is inlaid upon our reality, which is kind of funny. I never thought of it before, and I'm not sure what I think of it now, but it's a curious thing to consider. Whose white canopy is the self-illuminated moon, whose fly whisk is the stream of heavenly Ganga, he alone is the Supreme Lord. This imagery is about flow. Bestow on me your glance, which radiates immortal nectar, cool and pure like the crescent moon. The glance is a persistent theme in Trika Shaivism and among all of the literary works. And, what is that suggesting? It's suggesting contact, alignment, and flow. It's suggesting contact, alignment, and flow in the intrinsic joy that arises from contact, alignment, and flow, and the peace that joy, brings to our minds and our hearts. Radiating immortal nectar, cool and pure like a crescent of the moon. Why, O Lord, do the drops of supreme knowledge that flow from the ocean of your consciousness bliss not have the delicious flavor of immortal sweetness? Because information isn't where it's at. Information is always temporary in a world that is constantly changing. And so, all the things that we try to figure out and all the angles that we try to get, on everything, in a dynamic environment, what does that become? What does that effort become? It becomes an enormous obstacle to our actual peace and satisfaction and joy, and an obstacle to our capacity to contact, to extend our awareness and make real connection with our life and the important aspects of that life. Right? Over and over and over again, he is saying there's nothing to figure out about any other. There's over and over and over again, he's saying there's only to figure out about ourselves. And even though he's written this profoundly important book, which has brought him an enormous amount of prestige, he's saying, Why isn't it that great? The next sutra is a little bit surprising to me. Whose heart is not immersed in the delight of your nectar, O Lord, has no heart at all. O Mighty One, he should be despised. Now, this last line is surprising to me because, I don't think anybody ought to be despised. But maybe what he's doing here is turning the whole notion of morality on its head. And maybe what we're seeing here is him suggesting something about the nature of royal court politics and academic competition in the environment in which he operated. But really, it's not that different than the environment that all of us operate in. And he's saying, if we're not experiencing the joy that is innate to our own hearts, we are heartless. And if there is anyone to despise, it would be a person who has the opportunity to know this and doesn't engage it. But I want to loop back again for a moment. One of the things that has always troubled me about the yoga world, it is a thing that troubled me about Christianity. It troubles me about the yoga world. Is yogi there are a bunch of people in the world, the yoga world, who will say, we have a moral compass. And of course, they will accuse me of not having a moral compass. But if I were to have a moral compass, that moral compass would be grounded not in the notion that there is a right way and a wrong way, whether it be, derived from something worldly or something divine, meaning whether God gave us the Ten Commandments or, Moses had them, he carved them himself at the top of the mountain and brought them down. If I were to have a moral compass, it would have to begin with respect and not with judgment. It would have to be very different than the whole idea of a right and a wrong. But Rumi says, there is a field beyond right and wrong. Out beyond, right and wrong, there is a field. Meet me there. That field beyond right and wrong is respect. And the understanding that everyone is an expression of the divine ultimate reality. And because of that, they fundamentally deserve our respect. And further, human beings are social creatures, and all human beings want acceptance. All human beings want connection. We survive. A certain dimension of us survives and grows from the nourishment that we experience in contact, alignment, and flow. And so nobody wants to be ostracized or rejected or judged. Nobody does. That's why, the power of the idea of heaven and hell. Nobody wants to be rejected. Everybody's, the source of everybody's behavior that causes them to be rejected really exists in trauma. And that trauma is, from the moment we are born, ancestral trauma that we are wrapped in, that, has been conveyed to us by our parents and then conveyed to them by their parents. And it's actually, in fact, nobody's fault. It's just, karma. And so, if we transcended the whole notion of judgment, if we stopped, thinking this person's a good person and that person's a bad person and this person's doing that and that person's doing this and yada yada and blah blah blah. If we stopped with that and we simply began to bring our hearts, that's what we're talking about in this sutra, bring our hearts, into the experience of bliss and the affection for our lives and the people that we share it with, if we brought that into play every day for each other, for ourselves too, but for each other, we would, evolve a morality which was based in respect and expressed as acceptance, that really supported, that allowed and supported, facilitated healing of all trauma among all people, and the possibility of, a total reorganization of our own understanding and a total reorganization in the long term of human culture based on loving kindness that facilitates healing. And the obstacle to that is well, first of all, it's our own conditioning. But secondly, it's our own tensions that come up because, if it occurs to me that the most fundamental thing that we all get tense about is the distribution of labor. Because it can't be the distribution of money because none of us have any. But I hope you can see that the reason I'm bringing up to you this notion of morality, which I believe is completely man-made, it is a fabricated, concept, as opposed to ethics, which I think is intrinsic to our very existence, and suggesting to you that what would the appropriate way to be in relationship to our world and to each other is to constantly see the creative energy, and to respect the creative energy that has manifested everything. And in devotion to that creative energy, we accept all of the dissonance that comes up between us and everybody, and holding our awareness within ourselves, we dissolve that dissonance as we grow contact, alignment, and flow. Now, first of all, this isn't what human beings evolved to do. So I'm not telling you that this is easy. It ain't easy. It goes against our very nature. But, and I've said a lot in my life that, swimming upstream. It's not going with the flow. We are going against the flow in a way. We are creating an entirely new flow. But by understanding that, respect is the appropriate basis for relating to people, and acceptance of people and their traumas, and kindness and compassion for everyone, irrespective of what they've done, is fundamental to our own human development, because it's only in that environment that we can take in, the nourishment that is appropriate to our transcendence of the environments that we come into. Let's cultivate respect, and let's dispense with judgment. And for me, the phony baloney, moral compass that yoga people tout, as having derived from the yamas and niyamas, is just an enormous ego trip delusion that, I got over when I left the Catholic Church, in which I have been striving, for my entire life to transcend. So I would not like to despise anybody for any reason. But I think what he's doing here is he's making a comment about intellectuals in the Royal Court Academy, is what I think he's doing. Whose heart is united with you, O Lord, alone. It should read something like, he or she, or they, whose heart is united with you, O Lord. They alone are worthy of your power, Shambhu's power. And this is again sort of reminds me of Nityananda, and the completely natural way in which he endured in his unattached, uncomplicated connection to reality, and the intense devotion that he lived from, that facilitated magic and miracles constantly wherever he went. This is a teaching for all of us, that we should live in devotion, understanding that that we are not in control, and allowing our practice of contact, alignment, and flow, our devotion to our practice of contact, alignment, and flow, and the bliss that we experience in that process, to unfold its magic in the field of our lives, in our hearts and minds, in the field of our experience, and bless us with a truly, deeply rich and meaningful life experience. Meditation on you washes away delights and sorrows, as a river stream washes away highlands and lowlands alike. And here he's suggesting where we ultimately get to, which is transcendence. High and low, delight and sorrow. And he's also saying, in our world, the people who have the moral compass and who practice meditation with a moral compass are the people who are looking to be better, and in judgment of people who are not better or not something or another. And this whole exercise is telling us that spiritual practice that arises from devotion is ultimately beneficial. And spiritual practice that arises from some ambition, whether it be, and ultimately self-improvement is about power and acquisitiveness. But whether it's about power or whatever it's about, meditation that doesn't arise from devotion is ultimately useless. For those who feel no separation from you and for whom you are dearer than their own souls, what cannot be said of the abundance of their happiness? I roar, oh, and I dance. My heart's desires are fulfilled now that you, Lord, infinitely splendid, have come to me. And that coming to us is not a coming to us that bestows some knowledge. It's not a coming to us that allows us to have figured it out. It is a coming to us that washes over our hearts and brings us delight and allows us to let go completely of the figuring it out and just simply express ourselves, dance and roar in delight, whether it makes a bit of sense or not. And I bet you, here he is, he's saying, I roar, oh, and I dance. Do you think he steps on anybody's toes when he's roaring or dancing? Does he dance and clip somebody's shin or step on their toe? For sure. He is in ultimate delight and abandon. And this happens. But when you are in that state of dancing and roaring, and when you're in a state of ecstasy, of course you're out of your mind. And you know what? So what? And can't we celebrate each other's insanity, not like judge it and attempt to suppress it? Can't we appreciate this crazy ass world we live in? It's really crazy out there. Crazier than it's ever been in the history of the world. But from our lofty position, immersed in devotion, and looking out the window over the ocean here, we have the opportunity in this special blessing that we have to look out upon the world and celebrate its insanity, not fear and reject it. And, so roar and dance. In that state, O Lord, there is nothing else, where nothing else is to be known or done. We're in that state where nothing else is to be known or done, either yoga, nor intellectual understanding is to be sought after, for the only thing that remains and flourishes is absolute consciousness, whose voice, absolute consciousness, whose voice ever rings with the eternal sound Shiva, escapes spontaneously the cruel grip of undefeatable, endless sorrows. He whose voice ever rings with the eternal sound Shiva escapes spontaneously the cruel grip of undefeatable, endless sorrow. And really and truly, that's all you need to know. Whatever else you know or don't know is superfluous to that. The first person is distinguished from the second person and from the third person as well. You alone are the great person, the refuge of all persons. O Lord of the universe, how lucky are your devotees, worthy of being adored by you. For them, the turbulent ocean of the world is like a great pleasure lake for their amusement. Those who delight in you long for nothing but to identify with you completely. How could worldly desires ever be requested? For the devotee feels ashamed even in expressing the prayer, may you be revealed to me. In other words, immersed in that, the bliss of that devotion, what other circumstance or situation could possibly be anything to us? He's making a comment about ordinary religion and the ambition that ordinary religion promotes in worldly culture. Higher than me there is nothing, yet even then I practice jop. This shows that jop is but concentration on absolute oneness. Thus you instruct your devotees as well as the whole world through your akshamala, your mala and your repetition of the mantra. In essence, this is what constitutes you instruct the whole world through your akshamala. This is what constitutes jop. The unreal is indeed different from the real, and the real is indeed different from that, O Lord. You are neither real nor unreal, but the nature of real and unreal both. Though you shine ever more brilliantly than the rays of 1,000 suns, and though you pervade all the worlds, you are still not visible. Dark matter. Who knew? In this unconscious world, you are the form of consciousness. Among the knowable, you are the knower. Among the finite, you are the infinite. You are the highest of all. No more of these lamentations I cry out before the Lord. In spite of knowing all this, I am confused and I stray from the right path. Ta-da! His confession is very charming and touching, and reminds us that even though we have this profound vision and we see into the loftiest dimensions of our daily existence, time and time and time and time again, our conditioning and the tensions of our daily lives, pull us into a place where we forget. And it's fine to forget. It's part of roaring and dancing that we forget. At the end of the day, let everything that we do be about devotion. let's take responsibility for the tensions on our own hearts and minds and judge no one and respect everyone, and bringing, love and respect to each human being. Let's make our life about facilitating healing for ourselves and each other on whatever scale it is that our life calls us to perform. And for me, what I came to, and I'm saying it over and over and over again, is that the essence of sacred is contact, alignment, and flow. And that if we experience true contact, alignment, and flow with one person, then we can experience contact, alignment, and flow to some degree with every person. And ultimately, through this process of exploring and experiencing, contemplating contact, alignment, and flow, we will be nourished in our minds and hearts and souls profoundly enough that we see, through the matrix of interconnectedness that is human life, into the ground of that interconnectedness, which is totally only one. First we see the connection between ourselves and somebody else, then we see the connection between ourselves and everybody else, and it's a connection that, is independent of what our mind is telling us about anything. And it is opening to this matrix of interconnectedness that nourishes us profoundly and ultimately liberates us from the notion of any other. It allows us to see that, there's only one mind, that we are all, thoughts in. There's one symphony in which we are all notes. Oh. Yeah, contact, alignment, and flow is in everyone, but it is not what our engagement with our daily life, leads us to. Mostly our engagement with our everyday life leads us into building walls and trying to isolate ourselves from all the input, which is relentlessly painful. It's like me buying all these books that I'm never going to read. It's like our daily lives is constantly telling us we don't know enough and we might never. Eek! But at the end of the day, all knowing and doing arises out of the joy of the creative energy that is the essence of what we are. And it is attending to that essence that facilitates, an enormous expansion in our capacity to know and do. Ta-da!